How different would your life be if you could see through someone's minds and understand what they truly think and their real intentions for you? If you learn to read people carefully, you can often understand what they are thinking long before they reveal it openly. Here are 10 ways to read people's minds before it is too late. Before we begin, understand something important. Reading people is not magic. It is not mind reading in the supernatural sense. The Stoics never claimed to possess mysterious powers. Their advantage came from observation. They understood that human beings are remarkably predictable when you stop listening only to what they say and start paying attention to what they repeatedly do. Most people spend their lives trying to manage appearances. They carefully select their words. They create favorable impressions. They present versions of themselves designed to gain trust, approval, or influence. But maintaining an image requires effort. Maintaining a mask requires energy. And eventually, reality leaks through. The Stoics knew that truth always leaves traces. It appears in habits, it appears in reactions, it appears in choices made when nobody is watching. The person who learns to recognize these traces gains an enormous advantage. They are rarely surprised by betrayal. They are rarely confused by hidden motives. They are rarely manipulated by appearances. Not because they are cynical, but because they are observant. And observation is one of the most powerful forms of wisdom. The goal is not to become suspicious of everyone. The goal is to become aware. Because awareness allows you to see people as they are, rather than as you wish they were. And when you learn this skill, you stop being controlled by false impressions and start making decisions based on reality. 1. Watch what they do when there is nothing to gain. Anyone can act kind when a reward is involved. True character appears when there is no benefit attached. How people behave when no one is watching often reveals their real intentions far more than their words ever will. One of the greatest mistakes people make is assuming that behavior remains consistent across all situations. It does not. Most people adjust their behavior based on what they stand to gain. They become more polite when they need something, more generous when they want approval, more helpful when recognition is available. But the Stoics understood that character is revealed most clearly when incentives disappear. Imagine two individuals helping a stranger. One helps because others are watching. The other helps when no recognition is possible. The actions appear identical, but the motivations are completely different. One is serving an image. The other is expressing character. Toxic and manipulative individuals often perform kindness when it benefits them. They are generous when opportunities are present. They are supportive when influence can be gained. They are respectful when status is involved, but remove the reward and the behavior changes. This is why the Stoics advised observing people in ordinary situations. Watch how they behave when nobody important is around. Watch how they act when there is no applause, no recognition, no advantage. Do they still show integrity? Do they still demonstrate respect? Do they still behave consistently? Imagine a person who treats powerful individuals with admiration, but ignores those who cannot help them. Their actions reveal something important. Their respect is conditional. It is not a value, it is a strategy. The Stoics believe that genuine virtue does not depend on circumstances. A person of character behaves honorably, regardless of who is watching. This is why small moments matter so much. How someone behaves during insignificant situations often reveals far more than how they behave during important ones. The lesson is simple. Stop focusing only on how people treat you when they need something. Observe how they treat the world when there is nothing to gain, because that version of them is often the most honest. 2. Pay attention to what they repeatedly talk about. People reveal their priorities through repetition. If someone constantly talks about status, money, power, or other people's mistakes, they are showing you what occupies their mind. What dominates their conversations often dominates their thinking. Words reveal more than people realize. Most individuals believe they are hiding their priorities, but they expose them constantly through repetition. The Stoics understood that attention follows interest. What people discuss repeatedly is rarely random. It reflects what occupies their thoughts when nobody is directing them. Imagine spending time with someone who constantly discusses money. Every conversation eventually returns to wealth, status, possessions, or financial comparison. This does not necessarily make them a bad person, but it does reveal what they value. Their attention repeatedly returns to the same subject because it dominates their thinking. Now imagine someone who constantly discusses other people's failures. Every conversation includes criticism. Every story highlights someone else's mistakes. Every interaction contains judgment. What does this reveal? It reveals a mind focused outward rather than inward. Instead of examining their own growth, they study the shortcomings of others. The Stoics encouraged people to pay attention to these patterns, because what a person consistently talks about becomes a window into their internal world. A person obsessed with status reveals insecurity. A person obsessed with power reveals ambition. A person obsessed with criticism reveals judgment. A person obsessed with learning reveals curiosity. A person obsessed with growth reveals discipline. None of this requires complicated analysis. It simply requires observation. Listen carefully. What themes appear again and again? What topics energize them? What subjects dominate conversations? Over time, a clear picture emerges. Because people reveal themselves through repetition, their priorities become visible, their values become obvious, their motivations become easier to understand. And once you understand what occupies a person's mind, you gain insight into the decisions they are likely to make in the future. 3. Observe how they react to your success. Success reveals hidden emotions. Genuine people feel happy when you grow. Insecure people become uncomfortable, distant, or critical. Their reaction to your progress often exposes feelings they would never admit openly. Few situations reveal character more clearly than another person's success. The Stoics understood that envy is one of the most powerful and least acknowledged human emotions. Most people will never openly admit they resent your progress. They will never directly say that your success makes them uncomfortable, but their behavior often reveals what their words conceal. Imagine sharing good news with 10 people. Perhaps you received a promotion. Perhaps you achieved a major goal. Perhaps you improved your health, finances, or confidence. Pay attention to the reactions. Genuine people celebrate naturally. Their encouragement feels effortless. Their enthusiasm feels sincere. They ask questions because they are interested, not because they are searching for flaws. But others react differently. Their congratulations feel forced. Their excitement feels limited. They quickly change the subject. They point out potential problems. They minimize the achievement. They remind you of risks rather than possibilities. Sometimes the reaction is even more subtle. They become distant. Communication decreases. Their energy changes. Nothing obvious happens, yet something feels different. The Stoics would advise paying close attention to these moments. Not because success should make you suspicious, but because success exposes emotions people usually hide. Growth creates contrast, and contrast reveals character. Your progress becomes a mirror. Some people look into that mirror and feel inspired. Others look into that mirror and feel inadequate. The inspired individual uses your success as motivation. The insecure individual experiences it as a threat. This distinction matters because it tells you who can genuinely grow alongside you. It tells you who supports your development and who merely tolerated it while it remained theoretical. The Stoics understood that not everyone who applauds your potential will celebrate your results. Many people enjoy the idea of your success. Fewer enjoy witnessing it. That is why reactions matter. They reveal emotions words often hide. And if you pay attention carefully, they can tell you exactly what someone is thinking long before they ever say it. 4. Listen more than you speak. Most people are eager to express themselves. The more they talk, the more information they reveal. Silence encourages people to fill the space, often exposing their true beliefs and intentions without realizing it. One of the greatest advantages in human interaction is surprisingly simple. Speak less, observe more. The Stoics understood that wisdom is gathered through listening, not through constant expression. Most people enter conversations with a hidden objective. They want to be understood. They want to be heard. They want their opinions acknowledged. Because of this, they spend most of their time talking rather than observing, and in doing so, they reveal far more than they realize. Silence is uncomfortable for many people. The moment a pause appears in a conversation, there is an instinct to fill it, to explain, to clarify, to continue speaking. The Stoics recognized that this discomfort creates opportunity. When you remain calm and silent, other people often continue talking. They expand on ideas they originally intended to keep brief. They reveal motivations they did not plan to disclose. They expose assumptions, fears, frustrations, and desires hidden beneath their carefully prepared words. Imagine a business negotiation. One person speaks constantly, explaining every position, every concern, every intention. The other listens carefully. Who possesses more information by the end of the conversation? Usually the listener. Information flows towards silence. The person who speaks the most often gives away the greatest advantage. This principle applies to relationships as well. When someone feels heard, they become comfortable, and comfort reduces caution. Their language becomes more honest. Their priorities become clearer. Their frustrations become visible. The mask begins to slip. The Stoics often reminded themselves that nature gave human beings 2 ears and 1 mouth. Whether literally intended or not, the lesson remains powerful. Listen twice as much as you speak. Observe before responding. Gather information before forming conclusions. Many people make the mistake of trying to impress others through constant talking. They reveal their plans, their opinions, their strategies, and their insecurities. Meanwhile, the quiet observer continues collecting information. They learn who can be trusted. They learn who seeks attention. They learn who exaggerates. They learn who speaks honestly. The goal is not silence for the sake of silence. The goal is purposeful listening. Listen to what people say. Listen to how they say it. Listen to what they avoid discussing. Listen to what repeatedly appears in conversation. Over time, a remarkable thing happens. People begin revealing themselves without being asked. And once someone consistently reveals themselves, you no longer need to guess what they are thinking. Their own words tell you. 5. Watch their behavior under pressure. Stress removes masks. When people face difficulty, disappointment, or frustration, their true nature becomes visible. Pressure reveals patience, integrity, selfishness, or aggression more accurately than comfort ever can. Comfort hides many flaws. Success hides many weaknesses. Stability allows people to present idealized versions of themselves. But pressure changes everything. The Stoics understood that adversity is a test of character, not because hardship magically transforms people, but because hardship exposes what was already there. When pressure increases, people have less energy available to maintain appearances. Their true tendencies emerge. Imagine 2 individuals facing the same setback. Perhaps a business deal collapses. Perhaps a promotion is lost. Perhaps an unexpected problem appears. One person remains composed. They assess the situation. They adapt. They focus on solutions. The other becomes hostile. They blame everyone around them. They lash out. They complain endlessly. The event is identical. The reactions are not. The difference reveals character. Pressure is like fire. Fire does not create gold or weakness. It reveals them. What exists internally becomes visible externally. This is why the Stoics paid close attention to how people behaved during difficult periods. Anyone can appear patient when life is easy. Anyone can appear generous when resources are abundant. Anyone can appear calm when nothing is threatening their comfort. But what happens when frustration arrives? What happens when expectations are not met? What happens when someone says no? What happens when life refuses to cooperate? These moments reveal truths that comfort conceals. Imagine someone who claims to value honesty. Then, observe what happens when telling the truth becomes inconvenient. Suddenly, the principle is tested. Imagine someone who claims to value loyalty. Then, observe what happens when loyalty requires sacrifice. Imagine someone who claims to value patience. Then observe what happens when delays occur. The Stoics trusted actions under pressure more than words spoken in comfort. This lesson becomes especially important in relationships. Many people evaluate others based on pleasant moments, shared laughter, shared interests, shared experiences. While these things matter, they reveal only part of the picture. The real test comes during difficulty. How does someone handle disappointment? How do they react when frustrated? How do they treat people when stressed? How do they behave when things do not go their way? Pay attention to those answers, because pressure compresses character into visibility, and what emerges under pressure often tells you exactly who someone truly is. 6. Notice how they treat people beneath them. Respect shown only to powerful people is not respect, it is strategy. Watch how someone treats service workers, strangers, or people who cannot benefit them. Their behavior reveals their genuine character. One of the oldest Stoic observations remains one of the most accurate. Never judge a person's character solely by how they treat people they need. Anyone can be polite when there is something to gain. Anyone can be respectful when advantage is involved. Anyone can be charming when opportunity is present. The real question is different. How do they behave when there is no reward? How do they treat people who cannot improve their status? How do they interact with individuals who possess no influence over their success? This is where character becomes visible. Imagine someone speaking respectfully to executives, influential individuals, and important clients. At first glance, they appear kind, professional, considerate. Then observe how they treat a waiter. Observe how they speak to a cleaner. Observe how they interact with a customer service representative. Observe how they respond to strangers. Suddenly, a different picture may emerge. Impatience, disrespect, arrogance, dismissiveness. These behaviors reveal something critical. Their respect is conditional. It depends on status. It depends on usefulness. It depends on personal benefit. And conditional respect is not genuine respect. It is strategy. The Stoics believed that every human being possessed inherent dignity. They understood that character is demonstrated through consistency. A person who respects others only when it is profitable is not demonstrating virtue. They are demonstrating calculation. This lesson becomes even more revealing in everyday situations. Watch how someone behaves when they have power over another person. Power changes interactions. It removes consequences. It creates opportunity. And opportunity reveals priorities. Some individuals become kinder when given power. Others become crueler. Some become more patient. Others become more demanding. The difference matters. Because eventually, every relationship contains moments of imbalance. One person has more influence, more resources, more authority, more leverage. How they use that advantage reveals who they are. The Stoics would advise looking beyond appearances. Do not judge character based on polished behavior in important situations. Judge it based on consistency across all situations. Observe how someone treats the receptionist. Observe how they treat the driver. Observe how they treat the employee who made a mistake. Observe how they treat the stranger they will never see again. These moments are powerful because they remove performance. There is no audience to impress, no status to gain, no reward to collect. Only character remains. And character, when observed carefully, tells you more about a person's mind than any speech ever could. The person who respects everyone, regardless of status, reveals inner stability. The person who changes behavior based on social rank reveals something else entirely. And if you learn to notice that difference, you will understand people long before they reveal themselves openly. 7. Compare their words to their actions. People can say almost anything. Promises are easy. Consistency is difficult. If their actions repeatedly contradict their words, trust the actions. Behavior is the language of truth. One of the most expensive mistakes people make is believing declarations instead of patterns. The Stoics understood that words are cheap because they cost almost nothing to produce. A person can promise loyalty in a few seconds. They can promise honesty in a few moments. They can promise support, commitment, respect, and integrity with very little effort. But actions require investment. Actions require sacrifice. Actions require consistency. That is why actions reveal truth more accurately than words ever can. Imagine someone telling you they value your friendship. The statement sounds reassuring, but then they repeatedly disappear when you need support. They repeatedly break commitments. They repeatedly prioritize convenience over loyalty. What should you believe? The statement or the pattern? The Stoics would answer immediately, believe the pattern, because behavior is the most honest form of communication. Not because people always intend to deceive, but because actions reveal priorities, and priorities reveal character. A person may sincerely believe they value honesty, yet repeatedly choose dishonesty when pressure appears. A person may sincerely believe they value commitment, yet repeatedly abandon obligations when difficulties arise. In these situations, actions reveal reality more accurately than intentions. Many people become trapped because they continuously invest in potential. They fall in love with promises. They become attached to possibilities. They focus on what someone says they will become rather than who they consistently are. The Stoics warned against this form of self-deception. Reality exists in the present, not in future promises, not in imagined possibilities, not in hopeful projections. Reality exists in repeated behavior. This is especially important when evaluating trust. Trust should never be built on isolated actions, nor should it be built on persuasive words. Trust should be built on consistency. Can this person's actions be predicted? Do they behave according to their stated values? Do they repeatedly demonstrate reliability? Do they consistently align words with behavior? These questions matter because consistency creates security. Inconsistency creates uncertainty, and uncertainty often becomes the birthplace of disappointment. The next time someone makes a promise, listen carefully, but observe even more carefully, because eventually every promise reaches a moment of testing, and when that moment arrives, actions will tell you everything words never could. 8. Pay attention to envy. Envy often hides behind subtle criticism, backhanded compliments, or forced support. When someone struggles to celebrate your victories, they may be revealing thoughts they prefer to keep hidden. Few emotions hide more effectively than envy. Most people do not openly announce jealousy. They do not say, "Your success makes me uncomfortable." They do not admit, "Your progress threatens me." Instead, envy disguises itself. It wears masks, and those masks can be difficult to recognize unless you know what to look for. The Stoics understood that comparison is one of the greatest sources of human suffering. When people constantly measure themselves against others, insecurity grows, and insecurity often transforms into resentment. Imagine sharing exciting news. Perhaps you achieved a major goal, improved your finances, built a successful business, improved your health, developed a new skill. Pay attention to reactions, not just words, reactions. A genuinely supportive person usually feels energized by your success. They celebrate naturally. Their encouragement feels effortless. Their enthusiasm feels real. But envy creates different responses. Sometimes it appears as immediate criticism. Sometimes it appears as silence. Sometimes it appears as minimization. Sometimes it appears as a compliment that somehow feels insulting. You only succeeded because you got lucky. Must be nice. Let's see if it lasts. Don't get too confident. Notice the pattern. The achievement is acknowledged, but its significance is reduced. The accomplishment is recognized, but its value is questioned. This is envy attempting to protect the ego, because another person's success creates discomfort. It forces comparison, and comparison highlights personal shortcomings. The Stoics would advise responding with understanding rather than anger. Why? Because envy often reveals pain. The envious person is usually struggling with their own insecurities. Their criticism says more about their internal conflict than it does about your success. However, understanding does not require blindness. Recognize the pattern. Observe it. Learn from it, because someone who consistently struggles with your progress may also struggle with your future success. And that information matters, not because you should hate them, but because you should understand them. The Stoics believed that wisdom begins when reality is seen clearly, and envy, when observed carefully, often reveals reality more honestly than praise ever will. 9. Trust patterns more than explanations. Everyone can explain a mistake. Everyone can justify a bad decision, but patterns reveal intentions. If the same behavior appears repeatedly, believe the pattern rather than the excuse. One excuse means very little. One mistake means very little. One bad day means very little. The Stoics understood this. They knew human beings are imperfect. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone experiences moments of weakness. Everyone occasionally fails. The problem is not isolated incidents. The problem is repetition. Toxic people often survive on explanations. They always have a reason, always have a justification, always have a story. And sometimes those explanations sound convincing. That is what makes them dangerous. Imagine someone repeatedly arrives late. Each time there is a reason: traffic, stress, unexpected problems, emergencies. Individually, every explanation seems reasonable, but eventually a larger question emerges. Why does the same pattern continue? The Stoics would focus on that question, because patterns reveal priorities. Repeated behavior is rarely accidental. Repeated behavior is information. Imagine someone repeatedly lies, repeatedly disappoints, repeatedly violates boundaries, repeatedly avoids accountability, repeatedly breaks promises. Each individual event may have an explanation, but together they form a pattern, and patterns deserve attention. One of the most powerful shifts you can make in life is learning to trust evidence more than narratives. People often become trapped because they listen to explanations while ignoring behavior. They become emotionally invested in reasons. Meanwhile, the pattern remains unchanged. The Stoics would advise looking at outcomes, not intentions, not promises, not explanations. Outcomes. What repeatedly happens? What consistently occurs? What patterns remain visible despite countless discussions? These questions expose reality, because explanations tell you what people want you to believe. Patterns tell you what they repeatedly choose, and repeated choices reveal character. 10. Listen to your intuition. Your mind notices details long before your conscious thoughts catch up. Sometimes something feels wrong even when you cannot explain why. Do not ignore that feeling. Intuition is often your awareness recognizing a pattern before you can put it into words. Modern people often underestimate intuition. They assume that if something cannot be immediately explained, it should be ignored. The Stoics would disagree. While they valued logic deeply, they also understood that the mind processes information on multiple levels. Long before conscious reasoning reaches a conclusion, observation is already occurring. Tiny details accumulate: tone of voice, facial expressions, contradictions, body language, timing, energy, behavior. Your conscious mind may not immediately organize these observations, but your deeper awareness notices them, and sometimes the result appears as a feeling. Something feels off, not dramatic, not overwhelming, just a quiet sense of discomfort, a subtle signal. Many people ignore this signal because they cannot explain it. They demand evidence before paying attention. Unfortunately, by the time obvious evidence arrives, significant damage may already be done. The Stoics would advise a balanced approach. Do not blindly trust every emotion, but do not blindly dismiss every instinct either. Treat intuition as information, not proof, information, something worth observing, something worth investigating. Imagine meeting someone who appears perfect on paper. The words are right, the image is right, everything appears normal. Yet something feels wrong. The Stoics would not advise immediate judgment, but they would advise attention. Watch carefully, observe patiently. Allow time to reveal what your intuition may already suspect. Often you will discover that your mind noticed something before you consciously understood it. Perhaps inconsistencies, perhaps dishonesty, perhaps manipulation, perhaps hidden motives. The signal arrived before the explanation. And that is often how intuition works. It is not magic. It is observation operating beneath conscious awareness. Reading people is not about becoming suspicious of everyone. It is about becoming observant. The more carefully you watch behavior, consistency, and reactions, the less likely you are to be surprised by hidden intentions. The Stoics never encouraged paranoia. Paranoia sees enemies everywhere. Wisdom sees reality clearly. There is an important difference. The goal is not to distrust everyone. The goal is to trust intelligently, to observe before assuming, to evaluate before committing, to understand before depending. Most betrayals do not come without warning. Most manipulations do not happen instantly. Most disappointments leave clues long before they arrive. The problem is that many people ignore those clues. They prioritize appearances over patterns. They prioritize promises over behavior. They prioritize hope over evidence. The Stoics chose a different path. They watched, they listened, they observed. And because they observed, they understood. When you learn to do the same, people become easier to read, not because they change, but because your awareness improves. You begin noticing what others overlook. You begin recognizing patterns before they become problems. You begin understanding motives before they become actions. And this understanding protects you, not from every disappointment, not from every betrayal, not from every difficult person, but from unnecessary suffering. Because awareness gives you options. Awareness gives you preparation. Awareness gives you clarity. And clarity is one of the greatest forms of protection a person can possess. Remember this. People rarely hide who they are forever. Eventually, everyone reveals themselves. The question is not whether the signs exist. The question is whether you are paying attention. Because people often reveal exactly who they are, you simply have to pay attention. Now write this in the comments. I observe carefully, and I see beyond words. And remember, the person who masters observation gains an advantage that cannot be easily taken away. While others are distracted by appearances, you will be studying patterns. While others are persuaded by words, you will be watching actions. While others are surprised by betrayal, you will already understand the warning signs. That is the power of awareness. That is the power of observation. And that is why the Stoics considered clear perception one of the greatest strengths a person can develop.